It's great to see everyone here. Anyone who's joined this time, it's great to have you here. Anyone who was here last time, I wanted to say now we all know each other. So please feel free to, when I ask questions, to answer them, and at the end to ask your own questions. We're gonna do it all just in chat. I'll throw out questions, you'll put the answers in chat, and so please, everyone should feel welcome to take part. We have a pretty heavy topic today. And the question that we're going to be asking is being Jewish good for you? Now, as I mentioned in the last class, the rabbis of the Talmud do not like to ask big questions. So even though they spend page upon page and tractate upon tractate discussing how to be Jewish, there's not really a point where they step back and they say, like, wait a minute, this whole deal, is it a good deal or is it a bad deal? Like, they never really formulate it in such a way. But what I want to look at today is a small question, a small point of law that the rabbis debate and discuss that I think actually does bring up that issue, that like very large issue, you know, in a roundabout way, because that's how they do it. But I think that it does actually kind of get to the very big questions in its very narrow, very cautious way. So before we take a look at the sources, I want to just start by taking a minute to argue this out ourselves. I want to ask you in chat to quickly throw out either a pro or a con or both about being Jewish, or something that's good about being Jewish, something that's not good about being Jewish. Just put it into the chat. I want to see what we can come up with. Just like quickly in a few words, just, share your thoughts and okay, and if you can say sort of what's good about it or what's not good about it. History, okay, Jewish history is something to be proud of. Connections, no matter where you go. A Jewish tradition of learning, an emphasis on learning and thinking, a way to build community and find meaning in life. Zoom minion, community. Oh, these are really nice. I'm hearing a lot of good. Can we throw in some cons? Okay, it's hard. Discrimination. All right, anti-Semitism. Okay, excellent. So I'm going to stop there and I'm going to pull up this source sheet. One thing I wanted to say is that when you guys mentioned anti-Semitism, that was kind of my expectation of what people would probably think of. If you had to think about sort of what's good and what's bad about Judaism, that probably anti-Semitism would be like pretty high on your list of negatives. And what we're going to see that I thought was a little bit surprising in the biggest discussion that we're going to look at today, where I think the issue is really worked out, anti-Semitism actually does not come at all. So before we read this kind of bigger discussion, I want to read one other Talmudic passage that does discuss the issue of anti-Semitism as a serious reason to not be happy about being Jewish, which is actually the text about what do you do when somebody wants to convert to Judaism. So over here on this source sheet, this is the first text, it's from the Babylonian Talmud, and it says that the sages taught, if a potential convert comes to convert nowadays, say to him, what did you see that motivated you to come to convert? Don't you know that the Jewish people at the present time are anguished, suppressed, despised, and harassed, and hardships are visited upon him? Oh my gosh, I feel depressed just reading that. If he says, I know, and I'm not worthy, if he says like, okay, fine, I accept that and I'm still interested, I still want this, then like accept him immediately, right? Maybe he's crazy, but like, whatever, if he's willing to put up with all of that Jews go through, then like, go for it. Clearly this person wants to be part of the Jewish people and they should be accepted. And the text goes on, inform him of some of the lenient mitzvot and some of the stringent mitzvot, the easy things, the easy rules, the hard rules. And just as you inform him about the punishment for transgressing, so too inform him about the reward granted for fulfilling them. Say to him, be aware that the world to come is made only for the righteous. And if you observe the mitzvot, you will merit it. This is an interesting sentence. How do you understand that sentence? That when someone is converting to Judaism, you tell them, be aware that the world to come is for the righteous. Is this a warning or is this something positive? Any thoughts? Sound quality. All right, I'm gonna just take a break from the screen share for a sec, just because the audio is having issues. Let's see if that helps. Yeah, oi. 1 sec, I just want to see what's going on here. Let's see. Does that make a difference?
I think it does make a difference. I think it might be the screen share.
All right.
We'll see how that goes.
Okay. All right. Okay. So this idea of the world to come is only for the righteous might be saying one of two things. It might be saying that, it might be saying that being Jewish is not sufficient to get into the good place, to get into paradise. Being Jewish doesn't actually solve your problem. It's not that once you're Jewish, then you're automatically in paradise once you die and everything is good. But it's also possible that that line, the world to come is only for the righteous, is even a statement that being Jewish is not necessary to get into the world to come. That the world to come isn't based on, are you Jewish, are you not Jewish? It's based on, are you righteous, are you not righteous? So like, if the reason that you're trying to convert to Judaism is in order to merit to go to paradise once you die, then like, maybe that's not the right reason. Like maybe that's not actually something that will help you. I'm gonna try sharing screen again and let's just see if it works, because I do want to keep reading the text, and let's see if we're able to still hear. Okay, so now we get to, I didn't finish the end of this text. So you tell him that the world to come is for the righteous. If you observe the mitzvot, you will merit it. And do not overwhelm him or be exacting with him about the details of the mitzvot, right? We were fine with overwhelming him about like how terrible it is to be Jewish, where we're like anguished and suppressed and despised. But now all of a sudden, when it comes to the commandments, we're like, oh, whoa, we don't want to scare the guy. Let's like go easy and just give like a couple of highlights. And then if he accepts, circumcise him immediately, right? That's there's sort of two components to conversion. There's circumcision, which is only for men, and there is immersion, which is for men and women. And so here, that's the first step. So saying go ahead with that first step at that point. This particular text, I think, deals with sort of two aspects of what it is to be Jewish. There's kind of the peoplehood aspect of being Jewish, and there's the rules aspect of being Jewish. And in this one, the major leap seems to be the peoplehood aspect. Seems to be that it's hard to join a nation that like has a hard time in life. And the rules actually seem like kind of a smaller bit. And that like maybe even when somebody comes to convert, like don't make such a big deal about the rules. The rules aren't really necessarily the point as much. You tell them, but don't make such a big fuss about it. Okay, now we're gonna get to the main text that I want to discuss today. Now, as you can see, I did the same thing that I did last time, which is I color-coded it with blue and red. However, don't let that deceive you. Last time I said that the discussion sort of reminded me of a ping pong match where there were kind of volleys back and forth. And if that's the case, I would say that the discussion this time reminds me of a football game. Well, really, hopefully not a football game because I have no clue what's going on in a football game. But meaning, like a football game, there are things not just going back and forth, but going in many different directions. There aren't just two players, there are many different players. So it's a more complex discussion. But still, I thought that it would be helpful to sort of envision it as a dialogue, even if it's really actually a discussion with more people. Could I actually get a volunteer? I'll read the blues. Could I get a volunteer to read the reds? Someone just use the hand raising function.
What do you want me to read?
The reds. I'll read the blues.
1 second.
You want to just turn on your camera also?
I'm trying to.
Okay, great. Excellent. Well, while you're
Wait a minute.
trying, I'm going to start reading the first blue. Rav Huna said, a convert who is a minor may be immersed with the consent of the court. Okay, here we're talking about a child who is born not Jewish and now is coming before the court to convert to Judaism. Now, I want you to just try to think about what's going on here. If you could even just write in chat, why do you think that a child is going through a religious conversion? Like, why is that happening? That seems like more something that an adult would do. So can you picture in what kind of scenario do you think a child might be having a religious conversion?
Having done it?
Twice.
With having done it twice? It's
Okay.
a big deal.
Okay, all right, wait 1 sec. So just, I'm gonna keep the comments to chat though.
Okay.
All right, I see really two different things. The main one that comes up and that people have personally experienced here, who I know, is adoption. If a Jewish family adopts a non-Jewish child who may be like a brand new baby, then that child would be converted. Foundling infant, presumably we're talking about the same thing, that this infant, we don't know if this infant is Jewish or not, and if Jewish parents are adopting them, then same thing. Another possibility that people brought up is the possibility that the whole family is converting, right? That just, there is a family with parents and children and they all want to convert. Okay, Maura Hawley brings up another possibility that it's actually a child coming up to B'nai Mitzvah age or being raised by Jewish grandparents, meaning that we're not necessarily, in the other ones that we were more kind of talking about maybe even a baby, maybe even like, someone who was just born yesterday. And that there's another possibility that it might actually be someone who has a certain amount of consciousness. You can have a 10-year-old, an 11-year-old who actually has a strong religious identity. That's not something that's out of the question for a child of that age. And that maybe it is really something that to some extent is coming from them. Mother is not Jewish is another possible way that you could have a family that has both Jews and non-Jews in it. And therefore that they want this child to have Jewish identity, or this child, amazing. So someone who sat on a Beit Din for a 7 or 8-year-old being raised by her grandmother. So this is something that actually happens, that children do convert to Judaism. As you can see from these comments, the typical way that it happens is not out of the blue. It's not that there's a child whose entire family is not Jewish and then they show up and they're like, that's not typical. Usually it's more that there is some family connection of some sort, which may be why this text does not at all discuss the peoplehood aspect of Judaism. It only discusses the rules aspect of Judaism, and possibly it's because this is somebody who's already in some way entangled within the Jewish people. So all the Jewish people being despised and harassed and all that, they're experiencing that anyway. And the question is really just, are they going to be living under the rules of Judaism or not? Martha, you want to read the red?
Muted. Oh, now I'm not muted. Okay.
Go for it.
What is Rav Hona?
Yep.
What is Rav Hona coming to teach us? Is he teaching that it is in the interest of the minor to convert, and one may act in a person's interest even in his absence? We already learned that explicitly in a Mishnah. One may act in a person's interest in his absence, but one may not act against a person's interest in his absence. Or may love.
Okay, lots going on here. Let me just help you unpack this. First of all, this is a weird kind of challenge because it's not actually that the other side of Talmudic sages are trying to prove Rav Huna wrong. It's in fact saying that Rav Huna's statement is so true that it's completely obvious, and he didn't even need to say it in the first place because we already learned that explicitly in a Mishnah. But the thing that we learned in the Mishnah is not this particular case. It's just this principle. And it brings in this legal principle, which is one may act in a person's interest in his absence, but one may not act against a person's interest in his absence. So what does that mean? Let me give first a real life example. Let's say that someone says, okay, who here would like ice cream? So I can say, oh, well, my sister would like some ice cream too, even if my sister is not there, and my sister won't be mad at me because everybody likes ice cream. But if somebody says, oh, you know, who's going to take out the garbage, and I volunteer someone who's not actually present at the time, they may not be thrilled to have me volunteer them. So that's basically what the principle says, is that I can commit someone to something positive even when they're not there, but not something negative. I'll just give now a Jewish legal example of where this comes up. If someone comes up to me and says, would you accept this gift on behalf of your sister? I can accept the gift on behalf of her and then pass it on to her because it's sort of understandable that presumably she wants the gift and she'll be happy to have it. But if somebody comes to me and says, will you accept this bill of divorce on behalf of your friend? Then I can't do that because maybe my friend wants to be divorced. Maybe she doesn't want to be divorced. This is not necessarily a positive thing for a wife to receive a bill of divorce. Maybe she'd be happy with it. Maybe she wouldn't. So she would have to be the one to receive it herself. Nobody could receive it on her behalf because it's just not necessarily in her interests. So that's a general legal principle. They're bringing in this legal principle here in order to say that the reason that a child can be converted is because converting a child to Judaism is the same as accepting a gift on the child's behalf. That since Judaism is a positive thing, the first thing that somebody said when I said pros and cons, somebody said it's a blessing. So since if we assume that being Jewish is something positive, is something that is in your interest, then of course we can accept that on behalf of the child, and we can agree on the child's behalf that he or she should become Jewish. I want to just point out also that one thing that is completely absent from this Talmudic discussion is any discussion about whether a child has capacity to make decisions about their life or not, because the assumption is absolutely not. The assumption is so much absolutely not that we describe what is going on here when the child is being converted, when the child is standing in front of a Beit Din and being converted, we describe this as in his absence. The assumption is that even though the child is physically present, the child does not have any capacity to give consent about this major life decision, and so it's basically we are deciding for him or her. That's really what's going on here. And what the Talmud is saying at this point is, well, it's fine for us to decide for this child because this is great. Who wouldn't want to be Jewish? This is like a terrific thing. So of course it's okay for us to decide it for this child. Now the Talmud comes back to this. I'm going to keep reading the blue, and says it was necessary, lest you say, a Gentile prefers lawlessness. No, being Jewish is not necessarily a positive thing. Maybe it's better to live a life where you don't have so many rules. Just as we maintain that a slave certainly prefers lawlessness. Talmud held slaves. They preferred to convert their slaves to Judaism if possible, but they knew that their slaves were not terribly interested in being converted to Judaism. So they had regular interactions with people of non-Jewish descent who they were kind of offering Judaism to and seeing that they were not terribly interested. So they said, this whole assumption that Judaism is something that's good for you and that we can just impose it on a child, let's not make that assumption because we actually know people who would prefer to live without all of those rules. But then the Talmud continues and says, this teaches us, the new thing that we learned from Rav Huna is that applies to an adult, that an adult prefers to not have more rules because an adult has experienced a taste of prohibition. They have already lived the life of eating the cheeseburgers or whatever it is that Jewish law prohibits. They've already experienced a life of not having so many rules. However, for a minor, it is in his interest to convert. So basically, that's the new thing that Rav Huna is teaching, is that even though we see that non-Jewish adults are not terribly interested in embracing Jewish rules, we know that for a child, it actually could be a positive thing. And we know that this is true, that kind of if you raise a child in a particular lifestyle, and that's the lifestyle that they know their whole life, then they're comfortable in it. And it's not the same as coming to someone who's a full adult and telling them to do something. Okay, now the Talmud continues. Let us say that the Mishnah supports Rav Huna's statements. Okay, so now basically the Talmud is going to try to bring in a support for what Rav Huna had already said. A female convert or a captive woman or a maidservant who were ransomed or who converted or who were freed when they were less than 3 years and 1 day old. So this is a partial statement from elsewhere. We're going to see the whole statement in a little while. But this partial statement is here because it describes someone who converted when they were less than 3 years old. So, is it not the case that they immersed with the consent of the court? Here we have proof. If it says that there was someone who converted before they were 3, that proves that you can convert before you were 3. Martha, you want to just read the red?
Abaya?
No, here, no.
When she reaches majority?
No, further up.
Oh, sorry. So, what are we dealing here? What are we dealing with here? With a convert whose minor sons and daughters converted with him as they prefer to do whatever their father does.
Good, excellent. So meaning that what they're saying is that this case, the case of the child who converted when they were less than 3, is a case of a whole family that converted together. And there it's totally obvious to us that that's a case where it's good for the child to be Jewish, right? If your whole family is going to be Jewish, and then everyone else, your parents and your older siblings, everyone's going to be Jewish, and then they're like, oh, you're too young to be Jewish, then that's not going to be good for that young child. And that's a case where everybody can agree that it is good for a child to be Jewish. And this is, in fact, a reason that a lot of people have for their religious identity, is because they want to be like their parents and they want to be like their families. And that's a legitimate and good reason to embrace a particular religious identity. Okay, so that's all good. But now we're going to hear one additional contention. Rav Yosef said, when they reach majority, they can protest and annul their conversion. So we just made all these arguments for why it's okay for the Beit Din, for the Jewish court, the rabbinic court, to decide for the child that the child can become Jewish. And the child, let's say it's a baby, lives their life as a Jew, but then it says that once they reach majority, once they get to bar mitzvah or bat mitzvah, then they can say, no, thank you, I'm not into this. And then the whole thing is gone. They're not Jewish. They never were. It's just as if it never happened. Okay, why do you think, take a minute and give me a thought in chat about why do you think that Rav Yosef wants you to have this kind of exit ramp? Why does he want you to have a way to get out of it? Right? Oh, excellent. Sarah said, I thought once you convert, you're always Jewish, right? That's like generally a Jewish legal principle. Once a Jew, always a Jew. And so why are we giving, in this particular case, Rav Yosef is saying that there is a way out. Why do you think that is? Why do you think he wants to give a way out? Okay, so that once they reach a certain level of comprehension, oh, Rebecca says it's because we forgot the peoplehood. That maybe we just couldn't explain that to the baby, but that maybe the teenager might be able to understand it. Other thoughts? Other competing family polls, interesting, right? That maybe there were, we the court saw the people who were pushing one way, but maybe there are also people pushing another way. Okay, so for some reason, it seems to me, it feels to me like basically, even after we made all of these arguments, for a while, like we have determined that it is in this child's interest to be Jewish. At the end of the day, we can't really comprehend the idea of a child becoming, of a person becoming Jewish without consenting to it. And this child didn't really understand when they were 3 years old, and the rabbis never thought that this child understood. They thought that we were consenting on this child's behalf, and that we're not really actually thrilled with that. We'd rather that a person actually be able to make their own determinations. So it makes sense to actually give an exit ramp. But there is a problem with giving an exit ramp. Martha, keep going. Read us Abaye. Unmute yourself and read us Abaye.
Abaye raised an objection. A female convert or a captive woman or a maidservant who were ransomed or who converted or who were freed when they were less than 3 years old and 1 day old, their marriage contract is 200 dinars. And if it enters your mind to say that when they reach majority, they can protest and annul their conversion, do we give her the payment of the marriage contract that she will go and consume as a Gentile? Wow.
Okay, so here is the problem. If we have someone who is Jewish, but who at any moment could just walk away from it all, how can we enter into a marriage contract or really into any contract with monetary obligations when we don't really know who this person is and who this person is going to be? They're specifically talking about the marriage contract because that's viewed as kind of a Jewish perk. That's like something special that the Jewish community does for Jewish women. And so you wouldn't want to commit to that to someone who then might end up actually not being a Jewish woman. But I think that it's kind of a bigger problem of, wait a minute, like in general, legal systems don't like people in ambiguous states. We don't like a person who like, they are totally Jewish now, but like tomorrow they might not be at all. That makes us very uncomfortable. It's very hard for us to know what to do with this person, how to marry this, if you who like might end up not being Jewish tomorrow. If you can really enter into any kind of agreement with them, can you count them in a minyan? I don't know. Like, and so now I want to explain, just sum up the bind that we are in. Number one, we have established that it is easier to adjust to a new lifestyle when you're younger than it is when you are older. That's why we don't just say to everyone, oh, just only convert when you're an adult, because we know that it's actually easier to start something new when you're a child. Number two, a decision that is made by you or for you as a child is not totally fair to you. It might not really represent what you want and what is in your interests. So that's a reason that we shouldn't let a child convert. So we have a reason why someone actually should convert as a child. We have a reason that someone shouldn't convert as a child. And then we have problem number three, which is that being in an ambiguous state causes problems. So that kind of, those three factors kind of leave us in a bind where we're not sure what to do. We can't not convert this child, we can't convert them, and we can't so convert them because the ambiguity is also an issue. And so they have a solution. Which is, they say, I'm just going to read this part. They say that this is a case of once she has reached majority, that she gets into this only after she is an adult. And then the attacker says, well, when she reaches majority too, she may protest and abandon Judaism. And they say, no, once she reached majority for even one moment and did not protest, she may no longer protest. Meaning there is an exit ramp, but there is only one exit ramp. You get one chance, right? Because we don't want to just leave you in an ambiguous state forever where you're like maybe Jewish unless you decide that you're not. We give you one chance. Once you reach adulthood, once you reach mental capacity to be able to make a decision, we ask you, do you want this or do you not? You give your consent, and then that's it. And that way we're able to do all the things we want to do. We're able to let them start things when they're young, which is good for them. We're able to let them make a decision as an adult, which is good for them. And we're able to not leave them in an ambiguous state for a long time. Okay, so I want to ask you, that's kind of the major discussion in which you can see, Joseph Grossman, I'll get to you in a minute. That's kind of the major discussion in which you can see that they're really kind of discussing the question of whether being Jewish is good for you or not. But there are, I think, certain factors that are actually totally missing from this conversation. And I want to see if anybody noticed any of the things that were missing from this conversation. This kind of was about okay, is it good or is it not good? But there's some things that are missing. So first of all, Joseph Grossman, what did you want to say? Oh, just unmute yourself.
No, okay, now, can you hear me now?
I can hear you, yeah.
Okay. A tragic scenario. A child, a newborn, is in the hospital, has a Jewish father and a non-Jewish mother, and tragically, the child has some congenital defect and dies within a few hours. And the parents are heartbroken that the child was not converted to Judaism while it was alive. Is there any provision for conversion here post-mortem? Is there such a thing?
Not that I know of. It sounds like a really tragic situation, but I don't actually know of a provision for posthumous conversion, because I think that in Judaism, like I said at the beginning, the whole idea of the world to come is for the righteous, that it's not that you need to be Jewish in order to go to heaven or anything like that. It's more that being Jewish is a set of rules that you live by. And so I don't know that posthumous conversion would help anything. That sort of the idea that the Jewish laws are kind of more for the living. Okay, so did anybody notice anything that was missing in this discussion? Any factor that just wasn't brought up at all? Okay, well, I'm going to tell you one, which is that this whole thing was basically about, is this child going to like being Jewish, right? Where like, if they're adults, then like maybe they're already used to a different way. And so when someone converts a child against the agreements of parents, okay, so that's already a whole other issue that's here. I don't think that that's assumed here. So sorry, lost my place. Okay. Basically, this text was about, is this child going to like being Jewish? Are they going to like it because they want to be like their families? Are they going to like it because it's easy for them to adjust to it? But it doesn't actually get to a much bigger question, which is it good to have a set of rules, or is it not good to have a set of rules? It was just about, are you going to like the rules, or are you not going to like the rules? And I just want to mention that actually there is like this much larger conversation that is going on at the beginning of the time period of the sages between Jews and early Christians about the question of, is it good to have a lot of rules, or is it not good to have a lot of rules? Where the Apostle Paul in the New Testament is walking around saying that the more rules you have, the more you're being set up for failure. Because if you have a lot of rules, then you're bound to mess up on one of them, and then you're doomed. And then you're damned. Like this, you're just in big trouble if you don't follow all the rules, and that's why it's bad to have rules. And this text didn't actually address the question of if it's good for you to have rules, just address the question of like, will the child like those rules or not? And there is that whole other question. We don't have a ton of time, but I'll just show you one sentence in the source sheets, which was basically the Mishnah discusses it. The Mishnah is like the earliest layer of the Talmud, and it's written over the first couple of centuries of the Common Era. And there's a whole discussion about how actually, basically what this Mishnah says, I'll just summarize and then read the very end. This Mishnah says that says basically that it's really good to have lots and lots of rules, because every time, however many negative commandments, however many rules there are, things you're not allowed to do, every time you don't do one of the bad things, you get reward for not doing the bad things. So the more negative commandments there are, the more reward you're going to get, which is kind of the exact opposite of what Paul is saying. Paul is saying there's so many rules, there's so many things you're not allowed to do, you're going to get in trouble. And they're saying, no. If there's one thing that you're not allowed to do and you mess up, then you're in trouble. But if there are 100 things that you're not allowed to do and you don't do 99 of them, then you are awesome. You got a 99. So the more rules, the better. And that's at the very end. Rabbi Channah ben Akashia says the Holy One, the Holy Blessed One wanted to give merit to Israel, and therefore he multiplied for them Torah and mitzvot. That basically the more rules, the better. Rules are good for you. And so the way that I want to just conclude this, so I can leave a little bit of time for questions, is that the question of whether Judaism is good for you kind of depends on what the meaning of good for you is, right? When I say that something is good for me, do I mean it's good for me like a vacation on the beach is good for me? Or do I mean it's good for me like working a steady job and exercising every day and eating kale is good for me? When it comes to the latter, the kind of, it's good for me in the long run, it's good for me like eating kale, then the answer is basically yes. But rules are great. They are a path towards redemption. But there is one little caveat, which is, remember, they're not an automatic ticket into paradise. You still have to be righteous. When it comes to the former kinds of, is it good for me? Is it good for me like a vacation on the beach? The answer in the Talmud, I think, is a resounding, it depends. That basically what the Talmud brings up is that there are a lot of cultural factors in the question of, are you going to like being Jewish? It has to do with your family. It has to do with your past life experiences. And at the end of the day, as we saw when you sort of asked that child who's become an adult, what do you actually want? We saw that at the end of the day, it's a question that nobody else can answer for you. So I'm done, and I have 5 minutes to answer questions.